the losses keep coming for the Cleveland Browns. So we don't have to go through the whole thing and recap it for everybody because anyone listening to this podcast is very well aware of what's happened this offseason. I wrote my column on it on Monday. Hopefully, people read that. So if you haven't been paying attention the last week, Deshaun Watson is now up to 24 civil suits against him, even 2 dozen. And the last one, it's pretty well out there if you'd like to find it as to the allegations against him, the details involved. It's not pretty. The Browns, for their part, if they dug their heads any further into the sand, would actually be on the other side of the globe at this point. They won't make Deshaun Watson available during OTAs, which is, for anyone unaware, incredibly rare. Like, your head coach and your quarterback are pretty much always made available.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that Deshaun Watson has to sit there and talk about his legal situation. He wouldn't do that anyway. He would decline to talk about it. Fine. But then be made available to comment, decline to talk about it, and then talk about football things. The Browns don't even let him do that. Jimmy and Dee Haslam are nowhere to be found. Nor were they, by the way, when he was brought on. They did their own separate Zoom call. They weren't at the press conference. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry were forced to walk that plank. I guess, Tanya, my question here is, where does this go now? I mean, everybody keeps talking about they're expecting a suspension, could be soon. I mean, I'll say this. My 2 cents, I think if you're Goodell, you either put him on the commissioner's exempt list or you suspend him indefinitely.
Right.
And then circle back. Because if the NFL comes out and gives him 6 games, and then in August a video surfaces, like, you then have to double back. If you suspend him indefinitely, you don't have to double back. You can just end the suspension whenever the time becomes appropriate.
Right. Well, I think we all know whatever happens is going to happen on July 1st at 4:59 p.m. That's right before we all leave for 4th of July weekend, and many of us in our media go, and baseball All-Star game comes, and that's what the NFL will do, whether it's nothing, which, gosh, I can't imagine them doing nothing, or something like what you suggest there. For me with this, I used to like crave justice or expect justice or demand justice. What I've given up on justice in a lot of these things. I hate to say it, but I'm jaded now. I don't think we're going to see anything close to justice. So then I used to think about consequences. Well, there should still be meaningful consequences for somebody with this many allegations, this much evidence that something very, very troubling is happening, with his own lawyer doing this sort of backpedal thing, this sort of creepy things like, well, stuff might have happened, but that's not illegal. That's the hill that they're retreating to at this point. I'm giving up on consequences right now. I just want common sense. This is terrible for the NFL. This is terrible for the sport, for the team, for the Cleveland Browns organization. I mean, it's terrible for society and women as well, but for the people who are just making dollars and cents decisions, this is awful right now. When will common sense prevail and the NFL say this is a potential catastrophe, a catastrophe in the making, and we have to not get in front of it, but get behind it in such a way that we're at least not setting ourselves up for what you say. The video drops just as training camp begins, just as everybody's trying to rev up, and now we have to backpedal and do something about it at that point.
I really think there's a fair chance that the Browns paid Deshaun Watson $230 million to play like 20 games. I look, this has continued to spiral in a way that these allegations, these civil suits, came to light over a year ago at this point.
Yes.
Like, it's not like this happened a week ago,
right.
And hey, they'll get settled. And this has been going on and on and on. And now it's been reported that the original 22 civil suits, he offered each of these women $100,000 with an NDA attached to it.
Right.
And reportedly, according to Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, 18 of these women were willing to settle that. 4 were not. And Deshaun Watson said, well, then I'm not settling any of them, which seems like a terrible idea. But now, like, you just end up in this, like, Dante's Inferno situation where, like, he can't settle these cases now. Now it's almost gotten to a point where it feels like if and I'm not a legal expert, but it almost feels prudent at this point to just take it all the way here and just say, look, we're going to go through court. We're going to see how things play out. If you're Tony Busby and the 24 plaintiffs. So, and a lot of people feel like this isn't going to be adjudicated until the end of the season.
Right.
If you're the NFL, like, you want him front and center in a game. I just can't imagine the league being like, yeah, Deshaun, listen, get out there, and we'll put you in the 425 slot. Like,
right.
that doesn't make sense to
And
me.
we'll force Troy Aikman or Al Michaels or somebody to fur all through your situation. And so the broadcast networks take this hit as well as their announcers desperately try to talk around this while a football game is going on. And
Right.
you're talking about a guy whose lawyer thinks going out publicly and saying, just so you know, happy endings are not illegal.
Yeah,
Like he
unbelievable.
thinks that's a good defense at this point. So this is not a legal genius who is giving Deshaun Watson tremendous advice on how to pursue things. This is the guy you get when you have so many cases against you, but you have a lot of money that you wind up with this Giuliani level intellect as your lawyer. So you know, of course he looked at as oh, I can't settle all 24. Then we're going to go for none of them. It was a terrible mistake legally, but it helps us now know what's really happening because of that these other cases are coming out, and this is not a situation. It should be, like you said, it shouldn't be getting worse at this point. There should be it's been a year. There should be a lid on this. There is not a
Yeah.
lid. This is blowing out of the lid as we speak, with all the things going on, both from the accusers and from the lawyer.
And look, let's also let's just be realistic about this. So the Browns have two primetime games this year. One of
Right.
which they have to have. It's a Thursday night game. Okay.
Yeah.
The other one's a Monday nighter on Halloween against the Bengals. The NFL is like it has nothing to do with the Deshaun Watson situation.
Right.
Bullshit. Of course it has something to do with the
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson situation. They don't want to put him on television.
Right.
I I still believe so many people say, well, he's going to get 6 games. He's going to get 6 games. He's got 24 civil suits against him for
Right.
sexual misconduct and assault. You're going to give
I,
him 6 games for that? I,
I wouldn't be surprised because that's how the NFL operates, or how it operated in the past. I know they've changed the way they're doing things now. It's not Goodell just spinning a wheel the way it's been in the past. But I mean, I don't think that's justice. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they do, and they do it on July 1st. So we're like, oh my god, they go away, and they're like, well, that buys us time and it buys us credibility when he comes
oh,
back.
oh, that's definitely the weekend it's happening. I was on Sirius XM radio last night and they asked me about that. I said, the 100%. The second everybody starts looking forward to fireworks, the NFL
Yeah,
is going to be, oh, by the way, it's suspended.
yeah,
And then just go away for the weekend. I'm with you
right,
there.
right,
You also wrote something in Football Outsiders I read, I think it was about a week ago, about these teams that fool themselves into contention.
right.
And you led with the Browns, and it was well written. It was funny as usual. I couldn't agree with you more. Like I've been saying the same thing. I feel like the Browns have convinced themselves with $230 million guaranteed for Deshaun Watson. Hey, if we get him, we
Mhm.
can win the Super Bowl, which also fed into the whole, hey, we'll pay David and Njoku like he's Travis Kelce, right? Like
Right.
that. For the same narrative, they've spent, as you mentioned in your story, and I've talked about here as well. Like they've spent an ungodly amount of money, and I look at them, and I know you feel similarly. They're maybe good for like a playoff win if every
Yeah.
star in the world aligns, and then they'll go to Buffalo or to Kansas City and get
Right.
hammered in a playoff game, and
Right.
that'll be the end of it. And I don't know at this point where the Browns go. Like I feel like they've boxed themselves into a corner, not only with Watson, but with this roster. Like I don't know how you get unless they draft incredibly. I don't know where you go other than just they're going to go 10-7 at best and lose to Cincinnati. It feels like a franchise that isn't really interested in winning all of it. It's just interested in being relevant, which for
Yeah.
them would be a huge step up, but still nowhere near enough.
Right. It's kind of like where the Broncos are. I think we're going to talk about the Broncos a little bit. Hey, we're relevant again. That kind of matters after 5 or 6 years, like wandering in the mountains somewhere. But draft incredibly with what they've traded. They gave away a lot of draft picks to do what they're doing here, and a super cynical
Yeah.
move would have been you bring in Watson with all of this, and if you look at how they structured a salary cap, he's not making a lot this year. And the cynical
Right.
move would be we can absorb a 1 year suspension with this guy and we can compete in 2023. We'll be in better shape than we were with Baker. A 1 year suspension gives us, the debt was paid, move on. I don't know if anyone would buy that, but it gives them like safe harbor in that respect. That's not what they're doing. They're leveraging themselves in such a way so that in future years, everything's going to be too expensive. So they're really building and banking for this year. And you're right. You need pretty much Watson for all 17 games. You need Amari Cooper to have one of his best seasons. You need, Jadavion Clowney to live up to this 1 year deal, and you need all those things to go 11-6. That's what you need to do if you're the Browns, and that's not a good way of running your organization.
Do you think ultimately the Browns will regret paying Deshaun Watson 230 million, or do you think it'll be one of these things where in 3 years nobody's talking about this and he's throwing for 35 touchdowns? I mean, how do you think ultimately the Browns will look back on this contract?
very badly. I mean, I think that in the future he will have some seasons that are franchise quarterback type seasons, but they will coincide. First of all, they will come after all of this tumult. It'll come too late for the current organization. It'll come too late for the current general manager and head coach. So there'll be another regime change, which they have every year and a half. And usually these regime changes start with Jimmy Haslam issuing a decree and everybody having to scramble to do what he says. And then they didn't do exactly what he said the way they said it. So they all get thrown out the bathwater. And so, in a couple of years, oh, yeah, Deshaun Watson throwing for 35 touchdowns. This is a 9-8 team, for $50 million. That's a regret. That's a regret, in my opinion. Even though for the Browns, it's like, well, we're still relevant. It didn't pay off, and it caused all of this, and it's causing anguish among fans, among people in society. I think that's Jimmy Haslam doesn't care. The Haslams don't care. That's part of this as well. It's a toll being paid on the credibility of your organization on top of everything else.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I also just think, look, on the field, he's a great talent,
Yeah.
and you'd be a liar if you said otherwise. I also think, you know, the team he used to be on was a team that had a lot of guys on it.
Yes.
They never won shit.
Right.
Like, I mean, not for nothing. Like, they, and it wasn't like people look back, and I've said this before on Twitter, and people always come on Twitter and they're like, hey, they Bill O'Brien. Okay, yeah, sure, they did. And Bill O'Brien was a staple of Come On Coach before he left us. But that team was loaded with talent for years.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like Deshaun Watson was there for 1 year. I mean, that team had a lot of talent, and they won one playoff game. Like,
Right.
as much as I think Watson, the player, is fantastic, would I take him to win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years? No, I probably wouldn't. Not in that conference. I
No,
mean, I don't even know if I think he's a top 5 quarterback in that conference.
he's not Mahomes. He's not Allen. I don't think he's Herbert at this point. What Herbert has shown me. So
I don't know.
yeah. So I mean, obviously he's a very very good quarterback. But you're right. They had a Hall of Fame defender in J.J. Watt. They had a potential Hall of Fame receiver in Nuke Hopkins. They had Clowney at his prime. They had other guys who could
They're
play.
merciless.
They had merciless.
They had Justin Reed. They had Tyrann Mathieu. Like, they
Right.
couldn't win anything. They couldn't
Right.
do anything with that team.
Right. So you take the O'Brien discount and say, well, that was part of it there. But
Sure.
are the Browns okay? Stefanski seems like he's a good egg. With Haslam calling the shots, this is better.
Right.
This is a better environment.
And I don't know that Andrew Berry's a good GM.
Hmm?
I have no idea if he's a good
I have
GM.
no idea.